Putin's invasion of Ukraine is a continuation of the nefarious tactics used by the Russian military. The West gives Vladimir Putin and his military machine too much credit. This might make little sense at first. After all, only 9% of Americans have a positive view of Russia, and a warrant for Putin's arrest has been issued by the International Criminal Court for war crimes. You could be forgiven for thinking Putin's invasion of Ukraine was nothing more than a silly mistake by a country that takes itself seriously otherwise. The situation in Ukraine is dire, but war always results in dire consequences. What isn't mentioned is that these terrible outcomes are intended by the policy itself, and not just a side effect. The invasion was only a few days old when reports of torture and rape began to surface. In March of 2022, Russian troops sexually brutalized women and girls from the ages of 4 to 82, and electrocuted the genitals of male civilian prisoners. These acts of violence were just the beginning of a larger campaign. Many bodies, some showing signs of execution, rape, and torture, were discovered in mass graves after Ukrainian forces retook territory. Children's bodies that had been brutally abused have been found. Such atrocities can divert attention away from the more common evils of bombing civilian infrastructure like schools and hospitals and kidnapping thousands of kids. The fact that such strategies are commonplace is also overlooked. Crimes of a similar nature were committed in Chechnya, Georgia, and Syria during Putin's other adventures. The fact that the Russian military has been a villainous force for over a century is the most glaring omission from the public debate. The atrocities committed by Imperial Russia occurred in an era before the Geneva Conventions and other modern laws of war were established. Remember, though, that the armies of the Tsars were notoriously brutal even by the standards of their time. Despite his liberal reforms, which included the abolition of serfdom, Alexander II also commanded the extermination of many indigenous Caucasian peoples, including the Circassians. 600,000 to 1.5 million people were killed, and the rest were deported to the Ottoman Empire. The Russian death machine was haunted by the memories of its past. Even though they got rid of the Tsars, the Bolsheviks just made their style of war even more aggressive. Stalin's mass killings and deportations don't seem all that different from the Tsarist era. The atrocities of the present day are a continuation of that dark legacy. Putin has expanded on the Soviet effort to make World War II into a state religion, with the Red Army serving as a kind of messianic savior of Europe from fascism. After Hitler betrayed his pact with Stalin, the cost to Russia during World War II was enormous. It's shameful that Ukraine has adopted the Soviet method of war, in which Russian troops are used as cannon fodder until the other side is worn down. The Red Army's record as liberators in Eastern Europe, where they terrorized the locals by engaging in widespread sexual assault, is hardly more enviable. The number of rapes in Hungary is thought to be anywhere between 50,000 and 200,000. There were so many pregnancies after the liberation that in January 1946, Hungary's Minister of Social Welfare asked his superiors to qualify all babies as abandoned whose date of birth is from 9 to 18 months after the liberation. 70,000 to 100,000 rapes occurred in Vienna alone. The number is estimated to be over 100,000 in Soviet-controlled Poland. They can reach $2 million in Germany. After all they had been through, Stalin said, his soldiers deserved to have fun with a woman. Because of Soviet record-keeping practices, the true scope of the mass rapes will likely never be known. Putin has made it a crime to insult the armed forces or sully the legacy of the Red Army, so it is once again a state secret in Russia. He also foreclosed any possibility of prosecution for war criminals under the Geneva Conventions, either at home or abroad. Dmitry Medvedev, a former Russian president, declared on Saturday that Ukraine will be destroyed. Every war produces atrocities. The West has made some attempts, however clumsy, to abide by the principles of war and to reduce the horrors and crimes that might be committed in the future. Under Putin, who is nostalgic for the worst aspects of both Tsarist and Soviet Russia, the Russian military seems to see barbarism and cruelty as part of its identity. despite the fact that it has never bothered with such views. The invasion of Ukraine is the result of a culture that has internalized its historical wrongdoings rather than dealt with them head-on.